Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Untitled Reviews. Once again, temporary name. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Dispatches from Elsewhere. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. Well, first and foremost, I like that Fredwin's the one that's kind of taken over the spot of kind of doing what Octavio has done before now. And I love the whole situation of, at first, he's like, yeah, if you've never seen, like, if you've ever seen a limited episodical story, which of course you all have, and then he's also the one in control of the snaps, and he does it one time, and he's like, ooh, it feels so good, and he's like, oh, you know what, I'm gonna do it again, and he snaps again, and I love that it's like, oh yeah, like, you can see Peter, and he's beside a newspaper that says, like, 1 year later, and across the way is Simone. So I'm like, oh, are we doing the whole, like, skipping a year? So did he actually take that literally? I was curious, because that was something I brought up last episode, was that actually what he was going to do? And I like Fredwin almost kind of beating it in of, like, the whole thing of, like, yeah, it being the most terrible, worst thing that's ever happened in your life. And I thought it was such an interesting thing, because it took Peter realizing that maybe at the end of the day that maybe it was him in the grand scheme of things. And he's talking to his therapist that he doesn't know that somewhere along the way, from elementary school went to him into high school to him just getting a job, that basically he just kind of almost like he went on autopilot of, like, this is the path your life is, and just kind of went on it. And for him, it's like something as simple as cake or pie. Like he's like, I couldn't make a decision like that. And I thought it was kind of really interesting, and insightful, the conversation he had with his therapist, because she ended up talking about the fact is that he was kind of like having this, this perspective that he was kind of getting a little existential, like this was actually kind of good progress for him in the grand, scheme of things. She had talked about the fact is that you need to, like, write down stuff, like write down, like, some big things, some little things, and tell, like, how you feel. Because I forgot what because she had said, like, oh, like, you're making progress, and it's like, and he was like, oh, what is this, just kind of a way for me to keep suckling on the tit of, like, that is therapy or something like that. And he's like, I'm sorry, I don't know why I said it like that. Because the whole thing, which is interesting, because, like, for him, he felt like he kind of became, and I love the comparison he made. He compared himself to Wile E. Coyote when he's chasing the Roadrunner, and he's across, like, he runs off the road, and there's nothing but air underneath him. It's like the moment Simone asked him about himself, he found, like, oh my God, I'm standing above air. There's no ground underneath me. And he was falling. For him, he feels like he's almost kind of like a nobody, because he spent so long on the path of life he is, that he kind of feels like he locked so much of himself away that when the time has come now to open that vault of, like, to find out who's really under there, he's like, what if he's scared at the end of the day, like, what if there's no one there, so I just thought that whole, like I said, it was a very existential thing, but also it's really just kind of not even, yeah, it is existential, but more so than anything, it is a journey of self-discovery. And he's like, I wonder, like, how long is it actually going to take? You don't have to give a specific date. She's like, it's a lifetime. He's like, of course, because I told Simone, like, a year or whatever. So I thought that was kind of cute. And you see him little by little trying it out, like, writing down his likes, his dislikes. At the same time, I love that Fredwin's like, yeah, Simone's story is obviously a part of Peter's story, but at the same time, her story is her own as well. And so Simone's talking to Janice about things not working out with Peter. It's like, yeah, I was kind of more in love with who he, like, it's almost like I'm in love with who he could be, it's just because we had the game. It's like they found each other through this excitement and stuff like this, so they kind of found the more, like, heightened versions of each other. At least she saw the more heightened version of Peter, of, like, because he found himself in the game, like, who he was in his real life wasn't really who he was in the game. And so it was a situation of, it wasn't the same person she had fallen for. So but Janice was kind of like, okay, and she's like, no, like, go ahead and say what you want to say. And Janice is like, okay, so Peter is Peter, and that's that. But it's like you turned down that thing at college. You quit your job. She's like, I got fired. It's like, yeah, because you stopped showing up. It's like, is this really making changes in life is good, but is it just, are you actually, making changes, or just for the sake of changing, just so you can run away from stuff? Is it just another form of constantly running? It's like, at some point you got to, steadfast and be like, this is who I am, and this is, what I'm going to do type of situation. So I thought that was kind of interesting. And then at first, like, Simone was at that, like, it was like a dance class or something. At first she was about to leave, but a person was like, no, Like, come on, like, do your thing. Like, we're going to take care of you. And at first, she's kind of a little scared, but then, like, she starts really getting into it the rest of the class. I think she felt comfortable kind of finally, like, kind of let her guard down at that moment just to kind of let loose a little bit. And lo and behold, who she ran into? I was like, oh. I was like, I didn't expect you and Peter to run into each other because of the whole year thing, but it's like, oh, he's like, yeah. And I like, it's such an interesting little detail. Even if you notice the way Peter talks, it's very different. I think that's something you can definitely pick up on, showing the difference that he has grown, that he has changed, because even the way he's talking to Simone, he's a little more relaxed. He doesn't seem as rigid and just kind of like monotone. It's still there to a certain extent, but it's not as much as it was before. And she's like, oh, you got hats in both likes and dislikes. Because he's like, I realize I like hats, but I realize I dislike wearing hats. So, and she's like, oh, you like magic? He's like, yeah, I learned I like magic. He's like, no, for real. And he's like, I got like a graduating thing that's coming up, and it's coming up in a couple weeks. You don't have to come if you don't want to. I called Janice and she said she'd be there. Fredwin hasn't, RSVP'd yet, but she's like, yeah, sure. If I'm not doing anything, but I think because even in that moment, like the conversation was so interesting because like she's like, yeah, I just went to that dance thing and it was a lot of fun. He's like, oh, it sounds fun, but like you can tell she is kind of catching on to like, oh, like you have your little notebook of things that you like and everything. And also just like like I said, just a conversation, like it almost feels like night and day between like the Peter from before and this Peter right now. So it's interesting. So he does his little magic show. That little girl was super adorable when she's like, is this your card? And he's like, no. She's like, what was it she said? She's like, why are you doing this? And she like storms off. I was like, that's so adorable. It's like, that's the cutest thing ever, dude. But also Peter's like, okay, she's not here. It's like, it's okay. It's like, this is going to be okay. And he starts high-fiving the kids because I guess like everyone else that's a part of this class are kids and he's the only adult doing this. But you see Janice out in the crowd and he's doing the thing of like he's tied up and he's underwater. He's locked in the cage and everything. And then he sees Simone in the crowd. And he's like, hey, and she kind of waves to him. But I think because of that moment, it kind of got drastic because he's like, oh, he opened his, like, he was so excited to see her, he let go of his breath and it starts getting bad. The dude has to come over, smash the thing open with a axe. And I love Janice. It's like, oh my god, I was amazed. I mean, until the point when you started drowning, but oh my, Peter, I'm so amazed. She's like, you know what, I'm gonna give you some time alone. I was like, no, you don't have to. She's like, oh, I see some pamphlet over there, I'm gonna go do this. And Simone and Peter are about to start talking and he's like, let me go first. And I thought it was really, neat that the fact is he admits, like, I know that I was kind of a mess beforehand, and I'm not saying I'm perfect now. That the fact of the matter is, I'm not saying that, we should necessarily, like, get right together right now, but it's a thing of, like, this is a journey of self-discovery, and I think we should, why shouldn't we, be on this journey together? And I love him handing her his book of like, he's like, I want you to read this. And it's like, she's like, I like, what was it, explaining, basically like liking all this stuff about Simone, like her laugh. I even like Simone reading my book about stuff I like. And she laughs and he's like, I wrote that just to make you laugh. It's like, once again, I'm like, stop being so goddamn adorable. It's like, the romantic in me can't handle it. It's too adorable. I'm like, they're so cute together, and it's just like, them kind of giving it. He's like, the fact of the matter is, like, the one thing he's kind of been sure of, it's like the one thing he's been sure of in his life for a very more of than anything else in his life, the one thing he's kind of been the most sure of is how he feels about Simone. And the fact of the matter is, more so than anything, he wants to try. Like, he knows, like, he's like, I might mess up, like, things might be complicated, and I might mess up here and there, but the fact of the matter is, I want to try, and it's like, and they kiss and everything, and you're like, yeah! And then we see that 1 year later is, I even love that, it's like, they get, it's just it's super adorable because it's like, Peter's like, I haven't done, he's like, I don't want to presume or anything, but what's about to happen, I haven't done it in a very long time. And for Simone, it's like, I haven't done it ever. So it's like, that's such a cute moment. And I love how they filmed it, or just kind of like them, like, kissing and making out, and then like it like they're standing up, but then it shows like the like I love perspective stuff like that where it's like the bed kind of slides in the frame and they just kind of like it's like they're standing up but they're just leaning against it. But I like how that was done. But then we get the 1 year later, it's like, oh dude, so I like how like you have one thought about how things are going to work out, but then you see them kind of work out this way. I thought that was so neat. And it's like it's not a year anniversary of their them first officially going out. It's a year anniversary of them meeting. He's like the year anniversary of the game, us meeting, and so I thought that was so neat. And they exchanged presents. Simone's was actually pretty badass because he's just staring at it. She's like, I want you to see you the way I see you. She's like, I know myself. I was like, either this is going to be amazing or this is going to be terrible. And he's like, this is like the weirdest, nicest thing anyone's ever done for me. And it was just like, I was like, oh, dude. I mean, it helps when your girlfriend is like a super talented artist. So like that helps too. But nevertheless, then like we get into Janice's story, and I thought was kind of neat about Janice. It's like, oh, she's in class and stuff like that. I'm like, hey, because for her it's like Janice and Fred was kind of saying this whole thing about like her, where it's like she thought like maybe without Lev, like now that she spent her entire life with Lev, he's gone. She kind of felt like, oh, maybe her best years are behind her, but her younger self was like, no, you wanted me to stick around and kind of kick your butt into kind of doing stuff. So it's like, no, we're going to keep going. Like you might as well push yourself to do stuff while you're still able to, because you still got. And it's something she had brought up last episode, like she's got to find a way to kind of go on living without Lev because she's still got plenty of her own life to live, even without Lev. And so she ends up we see her taking college courses and stuff like that. So that's pretty dope. And as she's meeting up with that, Peter and Simone, and he's like, and Peter's like, oh yeah, like, because she's like, oh my God, Peter, that's really big, the whole like picture thing, and it's just like, oh, where's Fredwin? Oh yeah, Fredwin's late. Well, she's like, I think she was saying something that Fredwin would say, like, no, Fredwin would always say like being late is like a moral issue or something like that. And it's like, actually, when's the last time any of us have actually talked to Fredwin? So they go to track down Fredwin at his place, and then he cuts back to Fredwin being like, oh, like, he's like, you're probably wondering to yourself, what happened to me? Did I, basically like everyone else is kind of on their journey of self-discovery. He's like, what did he learn along the way? Basically, him being invested into this whole investigation, he goes into it deeper and deeper, trying to find out whatever he can about Clara, and then, like, asking, and then he starts putting all those little beads or orby things or whatever in, like, specific patterns and stuff like that, kind of going deeper and deeper down a rabbit hole. He's like, yeah, did I mention the fact is I'm not, not sleeping either? So it's like, where is this going? It's like you were hoping that his story would kind of take a different direction. But then he sees the kid outside with like the mind makeup on. He goes out there, and then it seems like goes black. Then like a doorway opens, and there's like a blue room and everything. And Octavio is like, okay, this is kind of like, this is where everything, where everything's kind of right, where you are right. So it's kind of like a perfect place for Fredwin. And it was like, oh, you've made it. I think it was this line later on from Janice where she was like, yeah, this perfect place called Elsewhere. And it cuts back to Fredwin, who's orchestrating all of this, who's kind of like the person in charge of the programming, is kind of smiling, almost like, haha, wink, wink, nudge, nudge, at, Janice saying like Elsewhere. I just thought that was kind of neat. And when once again, he doing the whole F to the red to the win. I'm like, I love that. It's such a dorky thing that he does. I love it. They basically kind of found Fredwin in a catatonic state where he was like, no, like none of this is real. Where I am is kind of real. And Janice is the one trying to pull him back. It's like, we need you, Fredwin. We love you. The fact of the matter is, I know that it seems better to be in that place, but we need you. And in that moment, you see like flashes of Fredwin spending time, in particular with Janice, because that's the person he's gotten close to over all of this, And so luckily they were able to pull him back, but then it starts making go like, okay, so what's this whole thing about us not being real and stuff like that? And I'm like, what is that about? Like, what is that? What does it all mean? And then Janice is like, Fredwin wants us to go back to Clara's place because he wants us to see something. And they go there, and Lee's waiting, and it's like, okay, where the hell is this all going? And it's like, Fredwin's like, I think they deserve to kind of know the truth. So I was like, what is this all about? So we end up kind of going back, and Clara ended up coming up with the idea of basically, instead of VR, she created augmented reality. It was meant to be a means of bringing people together, kind of like, it's like, she was saying the whole thing about like how people kind of like, when you hear that someone else has a better life than you, it kind of makes you feel a little bit bad. But when you have access, why does that better life kind of have to be somewhere far away? Like, can't that, because beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and she wanted to bring that to people face first, of like creating an alternate augmented reality rather than taking you into this virtual world. Is augmenting the world that you're in right now. So it was meant to be a means of kind of bringing that better life and that beauty into someone shifting their world into it rather than bringing them into a world like that. But we do see that slowly but surely all of Clara's ideas are slowly shifted and turned into like, the whole Jejune thing of kind of like, like corporatizing it a little bit. First and foremost of like, making it so that rather than people being out and about with the AR, they're at home like couch potatoes and this and that. It's just like little things that we see Clara having to compromise more and more. And it seemed like Lee was the one kind of being like, here's some compromises you have to make. It's okay. It's all going to work out in the end. This is all to make your idea a real thing. And then at that moment, it's like, Clara, come say something. And Lee steps up with Clara beside her, and she turns and looks, and Clara vanishes. And I'm like, and then Octavia was like, Clara. And it's like, she's Clara. So basically, the Clara that we've kind of been following this entire time is Lee the entire time. It's her, the side of herself. Like basically, it's like the side of herself that kind of represented elsewhere, kind of like wanting to like basically that was a part of herself she lost. Like kind of her, almost like her innocence, the creative side of her that wanted to share all of this with other people. That's what she kind of let go of, and that's what this has all been about. Like, she started this game because she was trying to, it wasn't just about helping other people. It was about, helping herself, because she was hoping that by doing all this, because she went outside and she saw what she had done, like the phones and everything that people were looking down at. And it's just like, it wasn't what she thought it was. Like, she had changed her idea so much. It was no longer what she wanted it to be. She kind of compromised it so much, her idea and everything. And now she was trying to recapture who she was. But it's like, there's no doing that, because even someone was like, did you ever find her again? And it's like, no, that's not what's important. This was kind of like the reality, because like my mind was immediately like, wait, if we're doing like the whole like augmented reality, does that mean that everyone's technically in the Matrix thing right now? Is that what this whole thing means by like, this isn't real? But it's like, the person who has the answer to that isn't Clara, and she points to the little boy, and it's like him. And then Peter's like, when I said I had to do that, kind of have to do the brave thing even if it's embarrassing. And she's like, I thought that was about the singing. And he was like, yeah, me too. But it's like, what is that about? Like, he has to go, like, who's that little kid? Because he's popped up. This is at least the third time the kid's popped up. He popped up, I want to say he popped up afterwards, didn't he? This is at least his fourth time popping up this season, maybe, if I remember correctly. It pops up at the end of the first episode, if I remember correctly. So it's like, who's that kid supposed to represent? At first I was like, is that supposed to be Peter or something? Like, wait, what is that? Is he like, what, the creator? Like, what? Because the title of this episode was Creator, right? And I'm like, I'm so confused, because even they're like confused, and they're like, because Janice is like, I'm afraid for him, but it's like, Fredwin's like, we can come along, and then Janice is like, wait, we can go with him? It's like, yeah, like, basically nothing's impossible. So, and then like everything shifts from color into gray, like, how Fishtown originally was. And it's like, what does this all mean? Wait, what? That's why I'm like, okay, I need to understand where all this goes. I also appreciate, though, like, I didn't talk about this, but the line at the beginning was like, yeah, this story is coming to an end, but also know, like, we're not at the end of our story. This story might be coming to a close, but we're not in the end of our story. We're actually in the middle of it. And I thought that was such an interesting perspective of, like, from the perspective of the show, we're at the end, nearing the end. But obviously for the characters themselves, they're literally in the middle of their stories, So I'm curious to ultimately see where all this ends up taking us. Next week's episode is a season finale, so I'm really interested to kind of get a clearer picture of understanding what this was. Like, I'm sure I completely missed the point of what it represents, or maybe next episode gives us a clearer picture, but I'm actually curious to see how this all ends up playing out in the season finale. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day, and goodbye.